This is the new Fujifilm GFX 100S medium format camera, and it is, without a doubt, the single best camera that I've ever used. Hi everyone, welcome to Pal to Tech. Today we are reviewing the new Fujifilm GFX 100S camera. I was able to test this camera with not one, not two, but three different GF lenses. The GF 32 to 64mm f4 zoom, the GF 45mm f2.8 prime, and the brand new GF 80mm f1.7 prime. Before I get started, there's a couple of things that you need to know. First off, Fujifilm North America did loan me this camera and all three lenses to test. However, as soon as I finish shooting this studio segment, this camera and all the lenses will be returned back to Fujifilm. In addition, Fujifilm did not compensate me in any way for this review. They were not allowed to have any input over the content, nor were they able to see this video until it's now been published for all of you. Whenever I review a product, I like to take a lot of time with the testing. For example, when I reviewed this X-T4, I spent 3 months testing this camera before I published the review. In the case of this GFX and these lenses, however, I had only 2 weeks to test everything and to shoot all these segments. However, I did use this camera a lot. I have taken it with me and have been shooting everywhere, and I do feel confident enough to not only offer you my opinion of this camera, but for those of you unfamiliar with medium format, to sort of bring you into that world a little bit. The GFX 100S is the fourth model in Fujifilm's medium format GFX camera series. And to be clear, this is not a cheap camera when you compare it to other X series cameras such as the X-T3 or the X-T4. The body alone sells for about $6,000. And adding a GF zoom lens such as this GF 32 to 64mm f4 zoom for $2,300 brings the total to about $8,300. If you add a medium G-mount telephoto prime to this kit, such as the GF 80mm f1.7 for another $2,300, you are looking at a camera kit of 2 lenses that's well over $10,000. Hold on to that thought because we're going to return to it later on at the end of this video. Taking it out of that plastic for the first time and feeling the ergonomics and the weight, the very first impression you get is how incredibly dense this camera is for its size. Every inch inside this magnesium alloy body construction is densely packed with electronics and mechanics. The camera is weather sealed for basic moisture and dust resistance. The camera body weighs in at about 900 grams, or just about 2 pounds, and that is including both the battery and the SD card. It takes a single NPW235 rechargeable lithium-ion battery. This is the same exact battery that's in the X-T4, and according to Fujifilm, will give you about 460 shots per charge, or about 60 minutes of 4K video record time. From an ergonomic standpoint, it's sort of a blend between the X-T3 and the X-T4 cameras. For example, it has the flippy door with hinges covering the side compartments like the X-T4, but the flip-out screen more like the X-T3. With this design, you can flip out the screen and have it lay literally horizontal to the ground, which is wonderful for getting those low-down shots. It also flips out to the side as well if you want to hold the camera up like this and look at it that way. Looking at the front of the camera now, you've got, of course, your lens G-mount. And to be clear, there are not as many G-mount lenses by Fujifilm as there are other X-mount lenses for their other line of cameras. However, the G-mount lenses that are available are wonderful and give incredible image quality. And of course, behind that G-mount, behind the lens, is the sensor itself. Yes, that 44 by 33mm medium format sensor in a Bayer array, giving you a 102 megapixel image. In other words, if you open up one of this camera's RAW or JPEG files in Lightroom, you'll find yourself looking at an 11,648 by 8,736 6-pixel image. Included with the camera is a USB-C cable and charger, some international electronic plugs, a basic camera strap, hot shoe cover, and a cable protector. You have both a 3.5mm mic and headphone jack. Below that, in a separate compartment, you have your USB-C charging connection port, a micro HDMI port, and a sync terminal. The other side of the camera gives you dual UHS 2 SD memory card slots, as well as a 2.5mm remote release connector. The top of the camera is where things get a little bit different than the top dials that many Fuji X series camera shooters might be used to. On the left is a PASM dial that also has 6 custom setting choices. And on the other side is a top screen display which you can customize. It provides a toggle switch to show you 3 different views: a basic camera settings readout, a histogram, which I love having right here at all times, and a sort of graphic 1980s digital terminal representation of ISO and shutter speed dials with an exposure meter below that. There's also a button to the left that allows you to change the background from dark to light and vice versa. Just like the X-T4, there is a movie still switch mode, and when you switch from one to the other, all of your settings for each type of mode remain exactly where you left them. The back of the camera follows somewhat of a similar design to other Fujifilm cameras, with your menu OK, DISP back, trash can button, and so forth. There's also a drive button on the left that allows you to switch your drive mode and access other shooting modes as well. One of the things that kept tripping me up so far using this camera ergonomically, because I came from an X-T4, was the relocation of the focus mode dial to the back of right here of the camera. So when I was out shooting, I was always trying to fiddle with it right here, right? Except that now it's located right here. Let's talk about the grip. I love this thing. I love how much larger the design is and how great this camera feels in my hand. If you compare it, say, to the X-T4 or the X-T3, it's not just a little bit larger, it's significantly larger. And this is probably a good thing because there's no optional battery grip available for this camera. It's absolutely the perfect balance in my hand. Within minutes, I was able to get this entire camera completely customized to my preferences. The menu items are identical to the X-T4, so moving from that camera to this one, as far as the settings and the menus are concerned, is very, very easy. Ergonomically, however, the back of the camera does take some getting used to, especially if you're coming from an X-T4. For example, they put the Q button right here, and I kept accidentally triggering it. I'm not a fan of where this is placed. It did take some getting used to for someone coming from an X-T4. There's no D-pad on the back, just like the other XT cameras have. Just a big space to rest your palm on. I do love the extra gripping space though on the back. I do have one gripe about the ergonomics: this redesigned joystick. I'm not a huge fan of this wider, shorter design. I found that often when I was moving it, I had to do it several times because it's a bit firmer than what I'm used to with the other X model cameras. Maybe if I had used this camera beyond a few weeks, I might have gotten used to it, and eventually it wouldn't have been an issue. But for the first few weeks, it was kind of a struggle, and I had to kind of keep doing it to make sure it was changing menu items. Medium format. That's the reason why this thing is $6,000 and why you're here, right? If you've never used medium format before, just know that shooting with this type of a sensor takes your photography to a whole other level. Being able to capture additional light, get better image quality, as well as have higher dynamic range and lower noise levels is what medium format is all about. The camera uses an X processor 4 and can output up to 16-bit images. Its lowest base native ISO is 100 and goes up to 12,800. Extended ISO will give you 50 ISO on the low end and 102,400 on the high end. You have lots of image options in the menu, and for all my test shots I used Superfine plus RAW, which gives you both RAW files and JPEG files at the best possible resolution that this camera can offer. You can also change your RAW recording compression options as well as your bit depth, but just know that if you add a higher bit depth, that will drastically increase your file size. For example, a RAW file shot at the highest quality with uncompressed 16-bit output will be about 210 megabytes each. As far as performance is concerned, editing medium format files in Photoshop and Lightroom wasn't that different for me than using crop sensor format files. I imported 75 16-bit RAW files into Lightroom with standard previews, and it took 4 minutes and 60 16 seconds on a Mac Mini with 32 gigs of RAM. And yeah, dragging the sliders was a bit slower in Lightroom, that's for sure, but it wasn't a deal breaker. And using Photo Mechanic is just about as fast with the GFX files as regular Fujifilm files. Check this out, I'm going to drag and drop a bunch of 16-bit raw images from the GFX 100 camera. You ready? This is in real time, watch this. Boom! Look how fast that is. Yes, these files do take up additional hard drive space, but honestly, if you're dropping almost $10,000 for a camera system and a couple of lenses, you can certainly shell out a couple $100 for a larger hard drive. So what's it like using a medium format camera and working with medium format files? I mean, really, if you've never done it before, let me put it to you this way. A long time ago, I had a neighbor who lived across the street from me who needed to have eye surgery. It was some kind of LASIK thing. I don't really know what it was, but I had to drive her there and I had to take her back home. When she got out of the surgery, she couldn't see at all, right? She had to have bandages around her eyes. Well, later that day, right, when she took the bandages off and the fog kind of cleared, oh my gosh, she called us up and was flipping out. It was like, I can see, I can see. It was, I've never seen anybody go through that, to be able to just see with such clarity. That's what shooting with medium format is like. Once you open a medium format image and start zooming in and zooming in and zooming in, you'll never look at the crop tool quite the same way again. You'll also need to think more about the type of lighting that you use, especially in portraits, as it's so easy to see reflections in the eyes now. You'll also have to be more mindful of reflections on the objects that you're shooting, as medium format shows everything. Now, even though we're talking about a medium format camera here, this camera has many features that you would find in cropped sensor cameras. This would include continuous high and continuous low burst modes with up to 5 frames per second shooting, interval shooting, multiple exposure mode, fast autofocus, all of your bracketing modes, and so forth. You can even set a shutter speed using just the dial as long as 1 hour and not need a shutter release cable. The overall image quality with this camera is the best I've ever used, particularly with the 80mm prime lens. The ability to really recover those highlights and shadow details is absolutely incredible. Here's another one I shot at ISO 800, f3.2 at 1/60th of a second. But if I go into Lightroom and I bring up selectively the various other areas of the image, plus bring down the candle a little bit, look at that! Look at that! Have a look at this! And yes, there's definitely more noise, but I was able to kind of fix that in Lightroom. The point is, there is so much detail I was able to bring back from this shot. Here it is at ISO 25,600. Have a look at this. And yes, Han shot first. With the launch of this GFX 100S, Fujifilm introduced a brand new film simulation called Nostalgic Negative. Fuji designed it to look more like those old photo albums, and it gives you more saturated colors in the shadows and softer tonality in the midtones throughout the highlights. By the way, the only edit I made to this raw file was to change the film simulation. Look at the ISO, 1250. And very little to zero noise. As I mentioned, I tested 3 lenses with this camera, and by far my favorite was the GF 80mm f1.7 prime. There is one issue with the lens that I did find, and that is there is a bit of chromatic aberration. Have a look at this. If I zoom into 200%, you see that there? You see the purple fringing? Of course, you can fix this very easily by dragging the defringe slider. See that? There. Fixed. But oh, what a lens this is. Have a look at this background isolation. Look at that. The bokeh is beautiful. It is beautiful, I tell you. Look at that nice background. It just makes the subjects really pop, right? And the 32 to 64mm f4 zoom is also incredible. It is a perfect general purpose zoom lens. Look at how tack sharp it is at f5.6. Look at that. Now, for shooting stills, there is something you should be aware of. The flash sync speed is set to 1/25th of a second. That might be a bit slow for some. I did not have time to test out a bunch of compatible speedlight units, such as Godox, with this camera. However, from what I was able to gather online, this camera works just fine with high-speed sync speedlight units. However, you may need to go into the menu settings and make a few changes depending upon your speedlight brand. Now, the speed and autofocus modes of this camera are almost unbelievable, considering that it's medium format. There are 425 separate phase detection points that cover almost the entire frame. Have a look here where I was using single point autofocus and the 80mm lens, and I found that the 45mm prime to be even faster. In addition, there's also face-eye tracking built right into the camera as well. I found the focus to be fast and smooth. However, I didn't find the face-eye auto tracking to be quite as good as the X-T4. But again, that is not a fair comparison given the sensor size. The bottom line is that the face-eye auto detect still had an above average hit rate and is definitely a welcome feature to bring into a medium format system. That being said, the autofocus performance of this camera in fast action or sports is not anywhere near what you would get on an X-T4 or an X-T3 camera. When you combine that with the lower burst rate, this simply is not the camera for sports photography, in my opinion, and it's not meant to be used for high action sports. That would be like taking your Ferrari to go off-roading, right? I mean, I did take the camera to a softball game to test out the 80mm lens with zone autofocus set to continuous high, and it performed just okay. Like the outfielder herself, there were definitely a few misses. And it's so funny with medium format because you can notice things in the scene that you would never have noticed taking this shot. For example, here the player missed the ball, right? I mean, look how far away that is. But have a look at this. Look at the coach, right? Only in medium format would you get that. Now, with subjects moving straight toward the camera, it performed even worse and had a lot of trouble nailing the shots, no matter what AFC mode I set it to. I got a few shots, but nothing like what the X-T3 or X-T4 would have done with, say, the 90mm zoom lens. And just like the X-T4, the GFX 100S has built-in in-body image stabilization that can compensate for up to 6 stops of camera shake. Okay, check this out right here. I am hand-holding the camera with the zoom lens at 64mm, shooting at 1/30th of a second. I am now zoomed in 200%. Have a look at this. This is at 1/15th of a second. Not bad at all. Here we are at 1/10th of a second, zoomed in at 200%. Look at that, 1/10th of a second. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is 1/6 of a second. Can you believe it? 200% zoomed in. Yeah, it's a little bit soft, but I'm at 200%. Here it is at 100%. Have a look at this. This is 100% hand holding the camera at 1/6 of a second using the zoom lens. But can we go further? Let's try it at 1/4 of a second. Nope, doesn't work. Right? Not gonna work at 1/4 of a second, but you can make it work at 1/6 of a second. Now, if 102 megapixels is, I don't know, not enough for you, and you need more megapixels, there is an IBIS feature on here that allows you to expand your RAW file resolution up to 400 megapixels. It's called Pixel Shift Multi-Shot Mode. Frankly, I could do a whole tutorial on that alone, and if I had the camera longer, I would. But here's what it does. When you set it to Pixel Shift Multi-Shot Mode, the camera takes a series of 16 shots in RAW format. And between each shot, it uses the camera's IBIS mechanism to move the image sensor by half a pixel between each shot. Once you've done that, you then need to download the free Fujifilm Pixel Shift Combiner software and allow it to combine all of your 16 images together into one massive, almost 1.5 gig DNG file. This file is huge. It's a whopping 23,264 by 17,448 pixels. You know, and just for fun, I tried using Photoshop Super Resolution to make it even larger, but the program told me, no, right? It's big enough, thank you very much. So check this out. I've got the image open in Photoshop, and Photoshop is telling me that it's 8.33%, right? When you can fit it to the screen, okay? And I'm on a big monitor here. If I zoom in, check it out. Look at this. You can zoom in so far, you can see the atoms on this color checker, okay? Now, as impressive as that feature is, there's really only a few cases that you can use it. First off, you've got to have your camera absolutely rock solid locked down on a very sturdy tripod. Second, your subject must be absolutely motionless. I tried taking it outside using this mode and shooting a plant. Now, it wasn't windy out and the plant was steady and I had the camera on a tripod, but what happened was, while I was shooting, a bee flew down and went into one of the petals or the flowers or something and caused the plant to go like this a little bit. Have a look at what that did to the image when I tried to combine it. So because it's so limited, you can really only use something like this for certain types of product photography, archival photography, and so forth. If I could have kept this camera a little bit longer, I would have tested this feature out a lot more because it is very cool. The bottom line, it's a very limited but an amazing feature nevertheless. Let's talk now about shooting video with this medium format camera. Having come from using an X-T3 and an X-T4, which I believe are the best mirrorless hybrid cameras on the market, my concern was, how does video fit in on the GFX 100S? Well, in my opinion, to put it simply, video on the GFX 100S is more like an add-on feature. It doesn't have the full range of options that you would get from the X-T4. For one thing, you can only shoot 4K video up to 30 frames per second at 400 megabits per second recording at 420 10-bit internally or 422 10-bit via HDMI. Interestingly, you get an additional option to shoot raw video 12-bit via HDMI. Unfortunately, I ran out of time to test shooting the raw 12-bit footage in time for this video, but I'm sure other YouTubers will publish that content. And if you want high frame rates such as 60 frames per second, you're kind of stuck using 1080p resolution on this camera. Now, like the X-T4, it does allow for both F-Log and H-Log gamma settings so that you have more advanced color grading in post-production. It has all the same audio, time code, and focusing options as you'd get in the X-T4, which again, as I keep saying this, is absolutely incredible given the fact that you're dealing with a medium format camera of this size. Now, to be clear, you're not going to be walking around, hey guys, what's up? You're not going to be doing that with this camera, okay? Although I just couldn't resist, and I decided to try out vlogging on a medium format camera anyway. But you know what? I've got OIS on, digital stabilization turned on, shooting at 24 frames a second with the 45mm lens. Not too bad. No, you're not going to be using this thing for vlogging anytime soon. As far as image stabilization for video, it has the same features as the X-T4, with OIS, digital stabilization, and even a boost mode. Have a look at the difference here between image stabilization turned off on the GFX 100S versus turned on while recording handheld in a moving vehicle. Additionally, you can use any of the film simulations for video. However, the ability for the camera to remain locked onto a subject, especially a subject running at you, is not as good as the X-T4. The autofocus is just not fast enough for those video situations. But again, that is not what this camera is meant for. This camera is all about photography and getting the best possible image that you can. Though, to be clear, it does offer you some advanced and very handy video features if you need them. One thing I did find really interesting, according to Fujifilm's website, was that the recording time has been bumped up to 120 minutes. It appears that they finally removed that awful 30-minute record time restriction. Again, I'm out of time to test this any further, but it would be interesting to see what other YouTubers report on that. To give you a fair and final opinion of this camera, I had to go beyond just testing, fiddling, editing, analyzing, and shooting. I had to nail down exactly what it is about this camera that makes it so special. Well, obviously, Fujifilm released a revolutionary image capturing device that gives you a medium format 102 megapixel sensor that fits inside of a portable and compact body like this. Not only that, but they added IBIS, autofocus, video capabilities, and dozens of other features that are somewhat new to shooting with medium sensors. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, this camera will run you about $6,000. And no matter how you look at it, that is a lot of money. In my opinion, from a technical standpoint and what you get with the hardware in the size and portability, absolutely 100%. In fact, I actually think it's a bargain for a camera of this image capturing quality. So it should come to you as no surprise by now that I was going to rate this camera a solid A in my video, right? However, I noticed something else while I was out using it. Something that I didn't notice until after about a week of shooting. It's big, okay? Heavier, bulkier than other cameras that I've used. And it requires more care and thought into operating it. And yeah, the files are larger and bigger and the lenses are bigger and all that. But you know something? I figured out that one more thing, that extra joy that I got using this camera. And that is, this thing is as far away as you can get from this thing, right? And I love that. I love that. I am so tired about hearing how smartphones are the only camera that you need and there's no point in owning any cameras anymore. That's just nonsense. Yes, this is a lot of camera to own, use, and shoot with. But you know something? When you're out shooting with it, you feel like you're using just a camera that you have a great partnership with. You agree to learn about the camera and to treat it with respect, and the camera agrees to give you the best possible images that you can get. A real camera. And you know something? I love it. I'm going to give the Fujifilm GFX 100S camera an A+. Now, as far as whether you should go out and actually buy one, only you and your budget can answer that question. Please check out other YouTube reviewers, borrow the camera for a week, and then decide. I'm going to be boxing up all of this gear and sending it back to Fujifilm. However, I did want to say a special thank you to Fujifilm North America for letting me test this system out for a couple of weeks. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to give it the like and subscribe. I will see you in another video again very soon. Take care.